Welcome, everybody, back to the Industrial Insights Podcast. I have Karl Siebrecht of Flexe with me today, and super excited to learn how the industrial real estate market can be served in a whole way that a lot of brokers are not familiar with, and especially the institutional investors are not as familiar with. So I think it's a huge untapped market that perhaps is untapped to me as a broker that I'd love to learn more about. Karl, thank you for being here. I appreciate you spending the time, and we're all excited to learn more about what Flex is doing and part of your journey of helping get it to where it is today.
Yeah. Hey, it's great to be here, Justin. Excited for the conversation.
Yeah, and it's an idea, as I heard doing a little homework, that started at a party. What a way to have your friends help get you into something. That's
It's
true?
still a party.
Yes. Yes, it doesn't have to stop just because
Yeah,
you got a good idea.
exactly. A party of sorts.
Yeah, so good. Is it 2013 is when you started?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. In 2013, in fact, it was a housewarming brunch kind of thing. And I've been an entrepreneur pretty much all my career. I've been a part of starting some tech companies, or joining others that were early stage and going through the process, helping to drive the journey to scale and everything else. And so I'd done this with a few companies earlier in my career for the first, 15, 20 years of my career. Had a moment on the beach after a company was sold, and after sort of like catching my breath a bit, was starting to think about, well, what should I do next? Definitely wanted to, had the itch, the entrepreneurial itch, was going to work at something small. And I was at this party and mentioned this to a guy who said, "I've got an idea for you."
You're like, okay,
Yeah, I'm like,
I'll
all
hear
right,
you
well,
out.
yeah, let me get some more orange juice and we'll have the conversation. But it turned out that it was the idea that this company Flex was built around. And it was this very clear and relatively simple problem statement that he shared. So he this was now a good friend, is built a company as a retailer in the home barware segment.
Okay.
Shakers, swizzle sticks, the little bags that you bring your wine to the dinner party in.
Yes.
And he was several years into this journey. It was going really, really well. All the product was designed in-house, manufactured in Asia, brought across through the port of Seattle, Tacoma, because he's based in Seattle, and then distributed nationally. And, doesn't take uh, anyway, the warehouse was near HQ, and there's a lot of benefit from that, but it's kind of a terrible place to have a single distribution node in the US when you're distributing nationally. But
Yes.
his simple statement was this. He said, "Look, warehouses are fixed, meaning I have to lease a building for several years." He said, "I ask for one, they laugh at me, they counter with five. And depending on the market conditions, if I land on three, I feel pretty good. Years."
Yeah.
And he said, "The reality is my business is so dynamic that it is a complete mismatch. I don't know how fast I'm going to grow. If I land the Whole Foods account for my gift bags, I'm going to grow like 800% next year. If I land something else, I'm going to grow 120. And if I don't land those, I might be 60." Plus, he was seasonal. Warehouses are fixed, businesses are dynamic. And he said, "Look, the solution I've attempted was, I have a buddy who has a different business, who's got in the same boat." And it turned out we were having this conversation and he was long on space. He had just leased a new building, anticipating
Yes.
growth over the next 3, 4, 5 years, had tons of underutilized capacity, which he didn't love. Here I was jammed to the rafters. I'm thinking about, how can I bridge me to, some future state. And we said, "Well, hey, how about you take some of my inventory?" And he did that. And on the one hand, it was this kind of elegant situation because he didn't have to commit to another box of capacity, and the other guy got incremental cash flow. But operationally, it was super difficult, right? Because there's no system for one company to handle somebody else's inventory and the economics and the billing and the inventory controls, all those things. But this is what he shared with me. That was a longer version of the story than I typically tell, but that it boils down to, like, warehouses are fixed, businesses are dynamic. If you can figure out a way to aggregate a massive amount of underutilized capacity, because a lot of people have gotten the big box and they haven't grown into it yet.
Yes. That's almost a guarantee that there will always be some form of underutilized capacity for sure.
Always,
Yeah.
always. If you can aggregate that and make it operationally accessible, and then you can offer it on more flexible terms, I think this is a big idea. So anyway, that was the genesis of what became Flex.
You're like, thanks for that. Let me stew on that for a little bit and do my homework and like see if there's an interest and a market for it.
Yep.
And then I could only imagine not just you building it and like exploring it, getting off the ground, getting stable, and just like the industry has evolved over this last cycle. And then there's the economy has evolved and we've gone through like the roller coaster ride. So I would imagine you've probably like that inception was one reinvention of Carl and business. And then I'm sure you've had a couple others just as you've gone through this 13 years now of like what it's turned into and like different segments of time in you building the business.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, after that idea, the first thing you do is go talk to people who are in the industry. I had never worked in logistics. I had worked in digital marketing.
Who'd you call?
Yeah.
Who was some of like your lifeline where you're like, hey, do you know anything about this?
I wanted to talk to both shipper side and, we're based in Seattle. I had a lot of former client relationships on the marketing side with big companies around here, Eddie Bauer, Starbucks, Nordstrom's, a bunch of Seattle-based companies.
And who all have supply chains and big warehouses and use the,
Correct. So, call my marketing contact. Hey, could you introduce me to somebody in supply chain? And they're like, oh, I don't know if I know anybody in supply chain, but, finagle, and I get some coffee meetings with shippers, brands, retailers. And then on the 3PL side, I literally was just kind of Googling 3PLs in the local market, introduce myself. Hey, could I buy you coffee? Go down south of Seattle to Kent and Puyallup and the places where the, warehouses are and talk to them. And, I didn't know anything. So I said, hey, here's this idea. Just give me your feedback. Is this dumb? What do you think? And
am I crazy?
Exactly. And what I basically heard from both sides were a ton of questions. Well, how would you work? How would the contract work? How would you guarantee, a quality service? Like who's going to be handling my stuff? And just at the time, yellow legal pads of questions, taking notes. And I literally at the end of every meeting, after people who knew this business, said two things. One, this is definitely a problem, both for the 3PL side, because, operating at a high utilization is one of the biggest drivers of profitability. On the shipper side, it's like, there are supply chain disruptions and like our forecasts are wrong. Certainly our 2-3 year forecasts are wrong. So this is a problem. I have a bunch of questions for how problems you'd have to solve, but if you figure it out, call me. And,
I wish you luck. You can do this.
Having been an entrepreneur pretty much my whole life, I'm like, okay, I'm going to step into this challenge. And it has been a journey. It's been a lot of tech that needed to be built to solve a lot of these problems that we heard, including a very fast and light, fast to deploy WMS so that the shipper side can plug in once, can integrate with one system, and then work with any number of different 3PLs out there in a distributed network, right? They can tap into this marketplace of underutilized capacity, but they can have centralized control tools that look a lot like marketplace tools, a way to sort of find potential options. We have a finder tool out there, and you can kind of look around in the network to see what kind of capacity is out there. Pricing estimation. How should this stuff be? This is kind of a spot market for warehousing. How does the pricing work? How can I learn more about what I should be paying, what I would have to pay? So pricing intelligence, get index types of capabilities, and then marketplace. Like, okay, so how do we match shippers, and not just a shipper, but the scope of need, the specific scope of need? Do I have 10,000 pallets, 5,000 pallets? What is it? Food grade? What does it have? Handling requirements? What's the throughput? What's the unit of measure? I mean, scope can get very, very, very complex.
Yes.
So tech to sort of understand what the scope is in order to match it to any one of, what's now 800 different 3PLs in our marketplace that have something like 3,000 facilities in total. Like, how do you do the matching? How can we add some value? Nobody ideally wants a middleman.
Let's get a new middleman in there. Yeah.
Right? Why? Nobody wants a middleman. So the only way you exist is if you add value to both sides. So
Yep.
a lot of that value that we create is through technology and our technology platform, and then unique data that helps bring transparency and insight to this service.
Yeah. And I got to imagine day one was the first customer signs the first contract
Yeah,
and like you're sweating bullets. And it
totally.
was in Seattle
It
or
was.
who's
Well, it was actually the guy that had the idea. This
okay.
wasn't a theoretical idea. We did our diligence. I had two co-founders who are both engineers, software engineers, and we said, let's go give this a try. We've learned enough to know that there's a problem out there. Can we build a solution that solves it? That's the thing. So we went back to the guy who had the idea, said, "Hey, if we build this, will you buy it?" And he said, "Look, here's what my Q4 is looking like. I need capacity and I don't have great options. You build something, yeah." And we literally did. I think we incorporated in August and we started generating revenue in October.
Yeah.
And so, so that's the demand side. We had a customer who had a need. So then the next part is, how did you find a warehouse?
Yeah.
It's scrappy as scrappy can be. You go down to, south of Seattle and, you cold call and you find people who
You
are
got your
willing.
knuckles warmed up. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we find this company and who's in the holiday novelties business.
Okay.
Specifically, the biggest category is Halloween costumes. They're one of the largest retailers of Halloween wholesalers, really. They have their own retail pop-ups, but they wholesale to the biggest retailers in the world. You can imagine they had 330,000 square feet in Puyallup, south of Seattle. You can imagine what that looked like in late September and what it looked like by October 15th.
Nothing more seasonal than Halloween.
Wild, right? And so we found this company, this guy, and we walk in and the inventory is just, they're all outbound trucks. It's just leaving. This is like early October and this thing is just draining. And the first meeting we say, "Hey, what are you going to do? What's moving in?" And he's like, "Well, we've got what would be next? Easter." I can't remember what it was. There's something several months from now. And the basic pitch was, "Do you want to make some incremental cash?"
I've got something that's before Easter.
Yeah. The second time we went down there to meet, it was almost empty and there wasn't much labor in the building. You didn't need it at that point. The people were skateboarding around. They had those long skateboards. And long story short, he's like, "Yeah, let's try it." So we get the guy who has the need, match it together. We had a very, very simple initial version of our WMS, which is literally just pallet in, pallet out, scan in, scan out. There was no break bulk of the pallets. It's very simple profile. And it went great. It went great. And so, before that inventory had even left, he's like, "Well, you're going to bring me more customers? Like, I got a lot of space." So it started the flywheel of building up demand. And then, of course, you talk to the next customer who's like, yeah, this is great. Can you help me in LA? Because I have a
Yes.
need in LA too. And
Now
like,
we're talking, Carl. I love
now
when
we're
you get
talking,
that.
right?
Yeah.
And then Chicago and then, on and on and on. That's how we got started.
I love that. That's the best of like someone had to trust you. You had to be smart. You had to be accountable and you had to go make it happen and go find it and put it together and just kind of go out on a limb doing something you hadn't done before.
That's right. That's right.
That's so wild. I love it. If we have a good feel for that, I got to imagine I could spend all of our time on where we're at today, just knowing that I'm pumped on operators and operations and how that all meets the real estate market.
Yeah.
And so you have gone through some of these leaps and bounds and now it's, what's our current state? What's our current state of the union?
Yeah. Current state of the union is, it's been a journey. We've had periods of, after we got this flywheel growing, we started to see real growth, in kind of I think in 2016, 17, we signed our first, what we would call enterprise shippers, which was our target.
Pre-COVID, so you got some big action for a couple years before the roller coaster.
Exactly. So big retailers, big CPGs, food and bev, industrial, big customers who all of them, what we learned is basically every business has some dynamic or uncertain part of their overall enterprise. And what we learned is that the ideal solution is to have this mix of fixed capacity, i.e. lease a building, operate it yourself, first party, or work with a contract logistics provider, both on a long-term lease, you need that. Absolutely. That's where you get efficiency. Think of that as like your base load, but you also need this flexible layer as a complement to that. We learned that in just shipper after shipper after shipper, there were use cases, seasonality, supply chain disruption, forecasts that we thought was going to be X and it wasn't. You can go on and on and on. New product launch. Oh, we did some M&A. It always happens. So
Regulatory, geopolitical. Now,
keep
yeah,
going.
yeah.
COVID, all these disruptions. And so we had some really great growth. We went from just pure pallet in, pallet out to adding different units of measure. So distribution, so case level distribution, e-commerce, each level distribution, and grew really nicely. And then COVID hit. Of course,
So you
who
have
knows what.
case and eaches.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
do. Yeah, absolutely. And COVID hits. And so there's this moment of like, okay, what's going to happen? And within a couple weeks, what we realized is that the behavior became pull forward inventory because there's risk. And it's like the macro B2B version of consumers buying toilet paper, stocking up and particularly retailers stock up on inventory. And guess what? There was a very, very, very strong demand for overflow warehousing. And so our business went from high growth to crazy growth. Massive tailwind for our business. We had raised a lot of capital in that time. Interest rates were close to zero. There was a lot of investors who were trying to put their money to work. So we raised a lot of capital, hired a ton of people, and served this massive need. As we knew ahead of time, we hadn't experienced it yet. We sort of knew that logistics generally was a cyclical business.
Yeah.
And as a spot equivalent, a spot provider in a cyclical market, we are hypersensitive to cycles.
Yeah.
So we started to
You think you're
feel,
on the leading edge? You have to be.
we basically,
You're not lagging, that's
yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. So we started to feel the tailwind. It's like a tide. There's an in tide and then there's this quiet period before it starts going out. There's a
Deceptive.
tailwind and then it was still. And we're like, okay, I think we got to batten down the hatches.
Yeah.
And the headwind started to build, right? We were on the other side of the cycle and it's been super tough for our business. I've been through cycles before. One of the things that if you're disciplined as a business leader, one of the decisions you often have to make is to lower the OpEx, lower your expense profile, which basically means you've got to let people go. And we've gone through that journey a couple of times and it's super painful. We've lost some great
I can tell that.
Yeah, super painful, but it's part of building a business, right? Had we not done that, we wouldn't have a massive balance sheet still. Like we have gone through that cycle and we're coming through it stronger because we protected our cash. We've been able to sort of pick our spots and where do we want to continue to innovate. And the other thing, which is a sort of a silver lining of that tough period, is it drives focus, right? It drives focus in particular for us in how to build our tech stack to scale even better. In a time where capital was free and the labor markets were, you could hire great people. We could kind of throw people at the demand surge and knowing it wouldn't scale, but we'd get to that later.
Yeah.
And then you go through the headwinds and you're there and you got to do it.
Later
And that's what we've
happens.
done. And it's kind of like necessity is the mother of innovation or invention. If you've heard that phrase, well, necessity is like we have got to control our expenses because revenue growth has slowed and it's forced us to be kind of more innovative on where we want to invest. So things that I've mentioned about really smart and now, of course, AI assisted enabled tools like very sophisticated for scope capture and pricing estimation and bringing the types of insight and unique data to the market to bring transparency to this whole category, if that makes sense. So those are the types of investments we've made that are paying off really, really nicely for us. So we've kind of been through that cycle and we're in probably the strongest position we've ever been in as a business. And we've got a ton of cash in the bank so that we can, play offense again, just in terms of the pace of innovation. And we get more problem statements from customers. Could you do this? Could you do that? Of course, not all of them are aligned with our strategy, but those that are, we can lean in and be very aggressive at building those quickly.
Yeah, I love how during COVID, everything you knew to be true was backwards, or at least in real estate, like what deals to do, how you did a deal, how you negotiated, like how landlords and tenants deal with each other. Like literally everything was backwards, where you're
Yeah.
like, I know it doesn't work this way, but it's working this way now. And it seems to have been working this way for the last quarter or 2 quarters. That causes all sorts of people to make all sorts of different decisions. And then to be like, okay, that was an anomaly, and like the basics are the basics for a reason, and like just to then have to figure out how you unwind that,
Yeah.
and then to
Back
where we
to
are today. It's
normal.
interesting to see your version of that too, because 3PLs, shippers, everybody took lots of excess space, and then they paid a ton for it. They paid a premium because that was the going rate, and it was that or not have inventory or not have capacity. So it's interesting that you must have been somewhat insulated by that because you weren't the one signing the lease with the landlord and paying the rent. But then you have your own version of that because it's all based on like A, having capacity to share,
Yep.
and then B, like people needing it, and then watching like that, like each of those kind of right size again. So I could only imagine like seeing it from your perspective.
Yeah. It was a ride. And the sort of continue, so how has that gone, right, over
Yep.
the past few years, and what are the implications of our business, or what have we seen and witnessed and been a part of? Well, as you said, like during COVID, everyone needed extra capacity. We were very helpful for many, 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 many companies in that endeavor. At the same time, developers said, wow, look at this warehouse, but this is growing. It's time to buy land, pour concrete, and build warehouses. A lot of new capacity starts being developed. 2020, 2021, 2022 is a ton of new capacity coming on. And by 2023 into 2022, interest rates go from basically nothing to it's ticking up. And the
Party's
whole
over.
party's
Yeah.
over. The economy starts to shift, right? Get more cautious. They've got too much inventory. So now they're not bringing in, they're not creating as much. At the same time, more capacity is coming online. The economy is slowing down. So, you look at vacancy rates, industrial vacancy rates in the US from kind of a almost near an all-time low to just climbing. And I haven't checked very recently. I mean, it's 8%, something like give or take a couple
Some
cents.
markets doubled, tripled, or quadrupled in the 5-year window based on which market and how much land they had and
Yeah.
how much demand they were
It's
seeing.
wild. So vacancy rates are close to maybe not an all-time high, but a high for the last 10 plus years, and in some markets all time, right? And I'm a economist hobbyist, certainly
Okay.
no genius, but when supply is plentiful, what happens to prices? Typically prices go down. What has pricing done in industrial leases? It has climbed up, and it's sort of stayed high. So think about that. Tons of supply has come on, but it's still like square foot rates are high.
Yeah.
What is going on? Well, it's a very, very sticky market. Pricing is very, very sticky and not as sensitive to supply and demand as in other industries. Look at fuel today, right? It's very different. It's because the term of the economics, the lease duration is long, right? So that is very highly correlated to the stickiness of the price. Okay, so at the same time, all this capacity comes on, prices stay stubbornly high. Guess what the price in the spot market for warehousing has done?
Got it.
So there
Yep.
are deals to be had because there's a massive amount of underutilized capacity in the market right now. So one of the people ask me like, what's a misconception people have about, your business? And it's like,
Yeah.
people think, oh, it's a spot thing. I got to have to pay a premium and I don't really want to pay a premium. There's a
Yep.
middleman. I'm going to have to pay extra. Like, it's just not true. Depending on where we are in the business cycle, I can promise you at the height of
Thank
the
you for
COVID.
breaking that back because I'm right there with you on all that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, oh, I'm going to have to pay extra because there's a middleman. There's all this stuff and it's a
Short
spot
term.
market. And it's like,
Yeah.
actually, no, certainly in this part of the business cycle.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of folks who are paying their lease every month. They call the landlord and like, hey, can I get out of my lease? And sorry,
I
no.
get along well with my landlord. They'll let me do what I need to do.
Yeah, sorry, no. But if you find demand to bring in and drive your utilization up, your economics can look right. And it's a sort of, marginal cost type of analysis. So anyway, that's what's going on in the market today. And back to my conversation about the tools we built, on our discover.flex.com, one of the tools we built is a little ROI calculator, right? If I have a fixed option of like, I can go get a 2-year, 3-year sublease and pay this much, or I could pay on an on-demand basis, depending on how my volume actually comes in relative to what my forecast says. It's like, am I going to save money? What's the better alternative? Should I just buy fixed or should I buy flexible? And what has to be true where one wins over the other? Because the reality is, depending on your situation, depending on the scope of your need, one or the other is the better tool, right? Flexible is not always the best by any stretch, and fixed is definitely not always the best. To the shipper, as we said, like what you need is both a fixed baseline with, scaled ability to flex on top of that. And that's
I love it. That's such a great way to position.
That's what our most mature customers, that's just what they do.
Yeah.
And let me just take a beat to draw a comparison here to freight.
Yep.
There's a freight market.
I was going there. I was saying my mind was going there for sure. Yeah.
Right. So transportation is 2/3 of logistics costs in total. Warehousing is 10%. So warehousing is this tiny piece of the total cost to move goods from point of origin to point of destination. 2/3 of it's transportation, 10% is warehousing, about 25% is inventory carrying costs. This is the CSCMP state of the market study that comes out every year. So warehousing is this tiny little bit, relatively speaking.
From 6%, but yes,
there
now
you
we're
go.
10.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So in the freight market, just focus on trucking, there has been a very liquid, scaled, high quality spot market in freight for about the last 50 years. The freight market, transportation, trucking market deregulated in the early 80s. And this kernel of what's become a spot market started to develop. And fast forward to today, and even over the last 20, 30 years, every single shipper in the world knows there's a spot market for freight. And most of them, in their every planning cycle, they make decisions. How much of my next year's freight do I want to contract in a 9 or 12-month contract? And how much do I want to leave available for spot? Leave myself some flexibility. And every year, that's just part of the planning process. That doesn't happen, except for our customers. It doesn't happen on the warehousing side because people don't really understand that there is a liquid, scalable, high quality equivalent in warehousing. So this to me, it's the same shipper. They have the same, it's like pick a shipper. They're tapping into spot market because they have seasonality, or they anticipate supply chain disruptions, or they have parts of their business that are right. All those same reasons. So the same dynamics exist in the warehousing side because the goods come, through the box, out into a freight lane, into another box.
It's a little warehouse on wheels. Yeah, it all follows the same trend.
So anyway, this is how we think about the potential for this market. Freight, in spot freight, is somewhere between, it's around 15% of the total freight market. In a typical year, during COVID tailwinds, it was like 25, 30, 35% of the market for the same reasons that we discussed on the warehousing side. And then on the backside of that spike was, probably single digits. And it's normalizing now a bit, call 10 to 15%. That's our belief is what the flexible warehousing market will be as well.
What's wild is probably another common misconception you've seen is the rise of like the co-working warehouses where company takes a 200,000 foot. They've got chain link fences or like corrugated metal against some uprights, and they're making spaces that are 10,000 to 100,000 to any size you want, and they just move the walls or the dividers. Where that is all predicated on your own people. Maybe you're sharing the forklifts that are on site. Maybe you've got your own, depending on if you're in 2,000 or 200,000. And then your model, just so that I understand and people listening understand, is predicated on partnership with 3PLs where they have their own people, they have their own systems, they have their own equipment, they have their own material handling or racking or whatever. Help me understand that a little bit, because I could imagine most people say like, okay, well, what about the people? What about the systems and all of that kind of
Sure.
stuff? And those are not the same. They're two totally different things, even though they're both predicated on like space being a variable size, where this is perhaps like overhead. All overhead in your inventory is variable to some degree.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we are 100% asset light, meaning we do not lease a building and then carve it up and sublease or sell it to multiple shippers. The asset version of the solution, it makes tons of sense on the one hand, because just as we discovered, the demand is there. The
Yeah.
shipper demand
That's
is there.
those are the people paying the premium that are driving this misconception that you get all the time,
It very well
Carl.
could be, but here's the thing, do you remember WeWork?
Yes.
Very infamous, tech disaster kind of tech company. And why was that? I mean, I'm an armchair quarterback here, but look, it's pretty obvious. They would buy long and sell short. They were leasing buildings, sometimes 10, 15, 20 years, and then selling short. So if they can't keep utilization high, the economics just frankly don't work.
With TIs baked in, big fat CapEx
Yeah.
stuffed into there too. Yeah.
And so they were subject to, the uncertainty, the volatility, the cyclicality of the industry. When you have a long duration on an asset, that's just the way that works. So if, and look, over 13 years, we've asked the question many, many, many times, and board members, and we've had debates like, hey, should we start to lease some buildings? And we'll still have an asset light bit, but we're going to lease some buildings too. And each time we've
It's a resist the temptation, Carl.
exactly. That's exactly right. It's
Yeah.
resist the temptation. And we're so thankful that that's
Yeah.
been the move for a couple reasons. One is because we'd be sitting around with a bunch of underutilized space,
You'd be in the jam right
which
now.
would be which would be a problem. But two, it's one of these like burn the boats. We are not going down that path. We have to make the asset light model work really, really well.
The boat's burnt. I can't do it. I'm sorry.
And so to some of your questions, like, well, who's handling the goods and how can we ensure quality and how can we vet providers? Because we work with,
Yes.
arm's length partners. How can we vet them? What does vetting look like? How do we build trust for shippers that this is a high quality? They're basically going to get the job done, high quality at a fair price with transparency. Like, how do we build that if we don't control the delivery of the service? Those are hard problems to solve. And that's what we've
been doing Airbnb that had no furniture and the door didn't work. And yeah. So how do you? What's the answer? That's a big question.
Literally, it is basically the core part of our tech stack.
Yeah.
I'll take it from, again, the shipper side. There's this process that, I think I have a need. So they'll go through this journey of assessing, procuring, and operating, right? Assess, think, or I know I'm going to have a seasonal peak. What are my options? I'll talk to, hopefully, and almost always, I'll talk to my broker. Hey, is there a seasonal thing? Could I just get it for the seasonal peak? And maybe there's inventory out there. Maybe there's not. I'm going to call my incumbent 3PL. Hey, can you help me with my seasonal peak? What are my other options? Oh, I've heard of this, guy told me there's this company out there, Flex. Let me go. What's that all about? How does that work? So there's this assessment phase. We have built tools to help people, guide people, free tools, guide you through that. So you can understand our model, understand our value prop, understand what's available, what it might cost you, this ROI calculator I mentioned. So these are tools to help folks in the assessment stage. And then they're like, yeah, I think I want to go forward. I want to get some, kind of run an RFP of sorts. I want to get some bids.
Yeah.
And we had built tools to help find in our network the best fit operators. Because the other thing
presumably there's multiple in Southern California. There could be 50 of them.
That's right. Yeah. And as we've been in this business longer and longer, we now have operating history.
Yeah.
On these operators, and we have relationships with operators. So we know which operators
they want to be in your network, right?
Yeah. Incremental revenue. So we can help with the procurement stage as well. Again, bringing value in that stage, help collect competitive bids, help the shipper understand the pros and cons of the different bids. And then if they say, great, I want to move forward with this one, then it's about operating. So this goes to the other part of the tech stack, this fast and light WMS, which is like, great, you can integrate with us, or if it's a simple profile and you don't even need to integrate, you just do a CSV upload. It's whatever the customer needs. But if you integrate with us, then the second one, the third one, the fifth one, the 25th one, you're already integrated. So we
Yeah.
help bring
That's
kind of
the
a
beauty of
consistent.
scale. Yeah.
That's right. Well, and then coming back to the quality and the trust, it's like, well, here's, every day you're watching your KPIs. How are they tracking across the different operators? And importantly, like in the physical world, stuff just can go wrong. Stuff does go wrong. Oh, the truck didn't show up on time. And one of the big areas of quality is just like, okay, so that KPI was missed that day, but how well did the operator respond to that and step in to help solve the problem? And this is another, it's harder to track in a KPI and in a digital metric, but it's
Yeah.
really, really important. That's the quality of the operators. Do they care deeply about the customer's business? And you want to find those operators, and we have found those operators, and we keep adding to the network. So that's how we do it, right? Kind of to your Airbnb thing, like no one wants to show up an Airbnb that looks really good on the website, and then you show up and there's cats, in the garbage, in the back of the kitchen or whatever it is. So how do we solve the equivalent problem, but in a B2B setting for, again, some of the biggest retailers and CPGs with the highest quality standards in the world? Like,
Yeah.
fact that we have this portfolio of shippers is the evidence
They
that
have the
we have
highest
figured out how to
standards
solve the
in
problem.
most cases.
Yeah. Yeah. Very high standards.
If you took the shipper hat off and you put the operator hat on
Yeah.
for a second and Flex comes knocking at your door, like, who says no? Why say no?
Well,
Why wouldn't it be a fit for you other than just like you're focused on doing you
yeah.
or your at capacity?
Yeah. So what are the objections we hear? One is like, are you a competitor of mine? Kind of, I want to work directly with the shipper. I don't want a middleman.
You're getting in on my action?
Yeah, exactly. So that's an objection we hear. Second is like, well, I don't want to use your WMS. I already have a WMS. In fact, I have 2 or 3 and I don't want a 4th.
Yes.
So what's our answer? Well, the first one is like, look, do you want to work with Nike or not?
Yeah.
If you
Well,
want
no
to
one
work with
has
Nike,
access to all clients for all
yeah,
requirements.
yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to work with them directly, you're certainly welcome to put your hat in the ring.
Yeah.
But it's not like both can be true. Go win your direct clients, and if you want to work with additional clients and get additional revenue, then we can help you with that. And
Yeah.
if that doesn't feel comfortable to you, peace, because there's like thousands of other 3PLs out there. So
I was
that
going
has
to say
never
it's a
been
big market.
that has
Yeah.
never been a problem for us. To the second one, I don't want to use your WMS. I've already got it. Like, well, look, it's already integrated with the customer. You don't have to pay anything incremental for it. And it's really easy to use. So, so that hurdle is one that we pretty much almost always get over. And again, if the operator is like, no, I don't want to do that. We're like, okay, peace. We'll work with the other guy. There's plenty of supply out there because it's a fragmented market. There are the very big, global leaders that have, 5, 7, maybe up to the largest, maybe 10% share. But behind that, it's very, very fragmented.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. It's so fun delving into the 3PL world and figuring out who's who. And then just like the middle market is gigantic.
Yeah.
And so, and highly fragmented, even though there's plenty on the big side, like scale is being achieved by a lot of big players, but the middle markets, yeah, it's undeniable in all these major markets.
Yeah.
We only got a couple minutes left, Karl. Tech stack. You've said it 19 times throughout this conversation, and AI is taking over everyone's world. And it finally got to my world where I put enough time and effort connecting all the tools and really starting to reap some of the rewards and benefits of like owning it, getting in there and figuring out what you have for workflows and for data and mapping things. This is like old news for you and your team, I'm sure. But what part of the AI journey has been interesting for you guys, or are you currently excited about?
Our journey we think of it in two bits. Bit one is AI to help make the products that support our solutions, our service to the customers better. So it's AI in our products, if you will. And then there's just AI in our business to help, operational efficiency, to help us, either drive efficiency or provide a better experience, employee experience. And man, the journey is still very, very early on. I shouldn't say, I think in the long arc of this technology, it's very early on.
Yeah.
But just some love. The reason I'm an entrepreneur is because I love building stuff. And now this has created an opportunity for like everybody inside the company to be an entrepreneur and to build stuff, no matter, you work in finance, you work in operations, you work in, there's opportunity to sort of rethink your job
Carl, look
and
what
then
I figured out. Look what's possible. Look what we might be able to do. What should we
it's
do
great.
this? Can we do
It's
that?
great.
Yeah.
It's great. And then in our products, there are a number of just ready-made use cases that are a very good fit for the technology. Things like, marketplace capabilities. How can I, again, collect a lot of unstructured data in scoping and do that very, very efficiently? Like, no one wants you to send them over a spreadsheet with like 200 rows to tell us what your scope is. Right. So building a solution that can be very elegant around, you tell me a little bit of information and I can help assist that creation along the way and make it painless for the shipper side, and then take that material, combine it with what we learned from other similar scopes and tune it. Pricing, we talked about, we have a ton of, a decade of proprietary data around bidding and price acceptance of bid for short-term engagements, like by far more than anyone else on the planet. And we can now use AI to generate more insight from that data and help be smarter about giving guidance pricing to shippers, giving guidance pricing to operators. Because operators didn't it's not a scaled common thing to say, well, how much should I price this short-term project? Maybe I price it equivalent to what my lease rate is. I provide a premium. Maybe I provide a discount. Like how's anyone else doing this? And again, to be able to bring some pricing intelligence to offer guidance. Everybody's free to
Well,
bid
now that
whatever
you
they
have
want.
each and cases or cartons, pallets, you name
Totally.
it.
Totally. So ultimately, every operator, hey, you're free to bid whatever you want. Bid high, bid low, bid whatever.
Yeah.
And the shipper's free to sort of pick which is the best fit, the right price, location. And we are a facilitator of that transaction. And AI can really help us do that even better, faster, and just be more robust by taking advantage of the unique data.
Yeah. I love it. That's so good. I've got more questions. I didn't even say Prologis once in this whole 60 minutes. So we'll just consider that like a introduction and a good start. And we can pick it up another time. I'd love to link to the tools that you had mentioned on your website that are available that are helpful for people. So if you wouldn't mind, tell us that one more time.
Yeah. So it's just discover.flex.com. And it's kind of, think of it as a branch of our kind of main presence on the web at flex.com, flexe.com. And yeah, have at it. And, anyone who has feedback, send it, because we're iterating on this like very, very frequently.
Love it. Karl Siebrecht, thank you for joining the podcast. Thank you for spending time with us. And I look forward to connecting with you later.
Yeah. Likewise, Justin. I really appreciate it.
Super. Okay. Have a good
Take
one.
care.
Yep. Bye bye.